sections.
I think I can finish on that actually.
Great, thank you. And just moving on to some of the issues you both Anissa and Tony mentioned in bus drivers who are really crucial in all of this. We're just going to look at how we really engage them. And so moving to Member Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, looking specifically at supporting bus drivers, and in our report, Driven to Distraction, under recommendation 5, there were a lot of things around the kind of working environment that operators can do to reduce the number of things that actually distract drivers and make it harder for them to deliver a safe service. So these were things like maintenance, everyday maintenance issues, things like mirrors being knocked off or, kind of badly positioned, provision of toilets. We asked for a review of radio contact procedures and also a review of best practice for bus infrastructure and design, which also was about sort of how the street was designed, the sort of bus lanes and everything else, and where the parking bays were in relation to bus routes, so that that was an attempt to kind of listen to some of the stuff that drivers told us when they came into our committee. So as a first question, and this is for everyone, but perhaps Anissa could start, is how has TfL consulted with bus drivers on the changes being made to improve bus safety?
My knowledge, other than tripartite meetings that we're holding with TfL, I don't see much of consultation there. But even there, the problem that we are seeing from a Unite point of view is that it's a tick box exercise. You put some ideas forward. We don't feel those ideas actually taken on board.
Is that taken on board by the bus companies or by TfL or by both?
By both. By both, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Are there some? Is there an example of?
Well, we could. For example, we were talking about standardizing bus checks, which are very important in the morning. You've got all these different companies. Some are giving 7 minutes, the others giving 10, some 15 minutes. This should be driven by TfL. TfL should be contractually asking the companies to have the same safe amount of time to check a bus before we take the bus out.
Can I just say, well, yes, that could happen. Clearly, TfL could mandate our whole operating lives, if you like. I mean, you could go to any sort of extreme, but each operator will have its own operator's licences, and those maintenance arrangements are lodged with the Traffic Commissioner and accepted as fundamental to maintaining that operator's licence. And I think certainly what we've experienced, and I don't think it's any different anywhere else, is that we're now far more attuned to the condition of the bus when it goes out in the morning. We're far more attuned to the driver's responsibilities. Now, the Traffic Commissioner will see the driver as the most important part of the maintenance system. So the first use check that's done by a driver in the morning is the thing that's done every day. Engineers only see the bus every 4 or 6 weeks. So the driver is the key to that. I think we're now far clearer of what those responsibilities are and what the driver needs to do. The drivers are clearer about their responsibility for that, but that sits with the operators under the operator's licensing framework, and I think always should do. If anybody wants to look at our YouTube video, we've got a YouTube video out there that's had tens of thousands of hits on our first use check process, and I'm not saying it's everybody has to do it the same way. It's a good example, but those sorts of things are out there and people can follow.
All the companies, all the operators running things in the way that you run those checks?
They don't necessarily run them in the same way as us, but they all have their same responsibilities under the operator's licence. And that's the framework we operate in. If somebody wants to change the framework, that's fine, but that's the way it sits today.
Could I let Sanisa just come back and then Claire?
But that's just the issue. We should be using best practice rather than giving people option to do whatever it's cost effective for them. Mm-hmm. And I must say, I actually feel that the companies, while I'm sad that being listened to, the companies are more forthcoming and listening in regards to that, to Unite the Union rather than TfL.
Could I have Claire come in
Yeah.
there as well? Thank
So,
you. Thank you, Sunisa.
So just on the engagement with drivers, I mean, clearly it's very difficult for TfL to engage with each individual operating company's union representative. So hence the tripartite was set up. So we have representatives from Unite who are there to talk on behalf of drivers across London. We have 2 or 3 bus operator representatives that attend the meeting, and then myself and a couple of colleagues from TfL. The idea of that meeting is to ensure that anything that affects all drivers is brought there by Unite to say, we're really concerned about this, what we're going to do about it. So I need the operators obviously to give their views on the issue raised. Where an issue is raised and it's a specific operator, I ask Unite for specifics so I can go and challenge them if it's not adequate. But when it comes to introducing the bus safety programme, a new activity like the bus safety standard, the fatigue research, TfL has sat down separately with Unite representatives from tripartite, because that's the appropriate way to do it, to take them through the programme, the bus safety standard, taking the Unite representatives through what was in the standard, inviting them to the launch, taking them through the fatigue research, inviting views on the questions that we were going to ask. The driver training, Unite were involved in exactly what we put into the driver training in terms of what things they were concerned about from members. We involved Unite in the security training briefing. We put that together and delivered it over the last year, which is something Unite brought to our attention, and we agreed it was not good enough. So we really took on board the suggestions from Unite and put that into our training course. Beyond that, the relationship needs to be between the bus operating company and their employees. So anything we're mandating, which is a new thing that applies to all operators, is right that we speak to Unite at tripartite and explain what it is we're trying to achieve. Taking individual safety initiatives forward needs to be done by the individual operating companies because it's their remit to do so. But some of the things I think Sunisa mentioned around best practice, he's absolutely right. We need to take the best and say, why don't you try it this way? And one of the things that we did is one of the operators had a good process for managing people that have been spat at. So spit kits was something that were either given as individual issue or put on a bus, and it was a bit haphazard. So because the operators that did that well put it on the vehicle, we mandated that that happened across the fleet. So where we see something that everyone should be doing because it's going to be better for the driver, we will mandate that. But there, as Tony says, there are areas where the operator within their licence needs to make those choices. But if through any research or repeat issues that we find there's a problem with a particular operator, that's my responsibility to pick up with them, and I will. So I just wanted to kind of give you a bit more around the things we do engage on, but what I expect the operators to do as well.
Thank you.
And I should say equally now that we get measured in many, many different ways by TfL, and we talked earlier on about data. I mean, we get measured on everything. I think they know my inside leg measurement, actually. But one of the things that has happened recently, there's been a long-standing engineering quality monitoring mechanism where TfL get a third party in to check a good proportion of our buses every year. And that's just been amended very recently to ramp up attention on the sort of defects that really irritate drivers, actually. So I think inevitably the scores will slightly rise over the next few months, and then hopefully we'll all start addressing them more readily. But that's directly directed at things that aren't quite as obvious. They're not safety critical, but they will irritate drivers and annoy drivers.
But actually, you say they may not be safety critical, but actually, if you've got a connection of several,
in the broadest sense,
of several minor issues, actually, and that's what's so important about those checks before the bus goes out.
Absolutely.
Because one thing not working properly might actually be the distracting thing that causes someone to be involved in a collision.
It's been a long-standing discussion point about rattling windows. Now, what impact does a rattling window have on a driver? Well, they get very irritated over time.
Can I just move us on a bit to look at the, we've heard about the Destination Zero safety training, and I just wonder what feedback there's been from drivers on the Destination Zero training.
We from Unite, we believe that this has been tailored mostly for novice bus driver. Someone who's doing the test rather than people who have been driving for many, many years. So we don't feel we have been actually consulted on that as much as we could.
What do you think? How do you think it could be improved?
Well, it could be improved by actually taking the views that my colleague John Murphy has actually given to TfL tripartite meetings, which we don't feel has been included in.
Claire, do you want to?
So, I think the first thing to say is it only started last week, so I haven't got any driver feedback yet. Obviously, that's Unite the Union's feedback from having attended the pre-briefing sessions and putting the virtual reality goggles on, etc. So, I think in terms of some of the feedback that came from John there is he didn't want the training to make the driver feel like it was their responsibility, the safety of London's roads, and I think that's absolutely critical. The idea of the training is to show that everyone has a part to play, but because it's for drivers, it's obviously focusing on the driver's part to play in that. And I think we need to make sure that in terms of the delivery of the training, which will be done by the bus operating companies, and we will audit and manage that. So in terms of the team that put the training package together, they will go out and sit in and observe how the training is delivered. We need to make sure the messaging is key, because I think that's the point. It needs to be landed right so people understand.
It's not about blame,
no,
it's about making sure that everything is as safe as possible. It's just about raising awareness,
and drivers know that there are issues with cyclists, etc. But I think sometimes just really putting yourself in that zone, it's very powerful if you. We're absolutely happy for you to come and have a look at the training. If you put the headset on and feel what it's like to be a bus driver and you don't know what's going to come around the corner next, and also if you're a cyclist and a bus comes close to it, all those issues being dealt with. And I think it's powerful. I don't drive a bus, obviously. I can't put myself in that position.
We are always in favour on any training.
Yeah.
That's always Unite stance. We want our drivers to be trained. We want repeated trainings for those people who have been driving for many years, even those who don't have any incidents, because that will just make sure prevent future incidents. But it's absolutely true that drivers feel they blame for everything, because there is no mechanism of a driver going back and saying, we've got a problem with this, can anyone help us with this issue or that issue. There's nothing there other than when something happens, putting down a current report and then waiting to see what the company's response is going to be.
Sorry, are you saying if drivers are reporting issues that it doesn't feel like those are being picked up?
Yeah.
So how are these measured? Is there a kind of measure of issues that get reported and how they're dealt with? Is that data, is that reported back to TfL? How would, if we're talking about trying to make the bus system safer, if we're hearing here that bus drivers are saying they're feeling that some stuff is being reported that isn't being acted on, how does that filter through both to the operators and to TfL? So
in terms of the assurance programme that I mentioned earlier that is carried out...
Sorry, could I... Yeah, sorry. Could I just say, Keith, it's very distracting when you were speaking and it seems to get picked up on the speakers.
I mentioned the assurance programme that our health and safety team conduct, and within that programme they are, as I said, talking to drivers, talking to garage managers, talking to guys booking drivers on about some of the issues that are happening. So we don't have a systematic report that comes in saying these things were raised and not dealt with, because obviously we wouldn't know unless we were told, but we, through the assurance programme, ask questions of how are safety related issues reported, and if we have any concerns about that, it's dealt with immediately between the safety manager and the garage manager in that assurance audit, or not audit, assurance visit. But what I will reiterate really is that because our relationship with the drivers is through tripartite, because it's through the union, we don't employ the drivers. If there's any systematic issues that aren't getting dealt with by operators, we need to be advised so we can pick that up with the individual operator. But what we do know is that the Hello London customer experience training that was rolled out over the last 2 years, every time there was a session, there was a sort of board where drivers could write down what their real issues were in terms of the whole role of being a driver. Every single one of those was fed back to the operators concerned through steps, who were the people running the course, and we wanted to see what progress had been made on those. So we have shifted emphasis to say that we will get feedback and we will put it back to the operator. So I think we need to keep that loop going, but it really is up to the operators to ensure those processes are in place, and that's what our assurance system does.
Okay, but you are checking, if you're hearing stuff from
Oh yeah,
labs,
absolutely.
you are checking
absolutely.
back with
yes.
the operators?
Yes, that's our job to do that, because we can't ignore it,
Okay.
obviously we wouldn't.
Okay, and that is reported in TfL board papers or?
Well, it would come through the tripartite meeting. So if there's a specific issue with a safety, so if there's a road danger issue or a junction or an issue with a layout that we are concerned about, we have a process where the operator can feed that into our control centre,
Yep.
and we can deal with that. If we get told through Unite that these things are getting fed in but nothing's happening, we'll deal with them. But I haven't had that yet, so that's not come to me. So if that is an issue, we need to pick it up, but that's between, obviously the
Okay.
union need to raise those specifics.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll hear if things get raised and not
Okay,
dealt with.
Thank you.
The toilet provision
Yeah.
was one of the really serious issues that we
Absolutely.
heard about in the round table. Absolutely shocking that there were routes that had no toilets. And, you know, particularly we heard from bus drivers who menstruate who said how difficult it was when they were on their period. We gather that every route was due to have a toilet by 2017 and that they would be open all hours by 2018. Is that now the case?
The programme for the 42 bus routes that didn't have a toilet 24/7 is due for completion in July 2019, which is earlier than the original date, which was May 20. So we've brought that date forward. So where we are at the moment is we have got half of those facilities in 26, and we've got the remainder to do in the next couple of months. Now, the reason, I mean, it's absolutely despicable that a driver can't use a toilet. And, you know, I have to say, I didn't, until I came to buses, realise that this was a situation. But having found that it's a situation, we are doing what we can to address it. The Mayor has helped us with this in terms of the funding. But that's not where the challenge is. The challenge is locating the toilet on the right location and getting borough support for that, obviously local community support for it, and making sure the utilities are available. So there are about 4 to 6 locations where we're really struggling to get the toilet where we need it to go. So we're having to look at alternatives, which might not be exactly where we want.
So that's, sorry, people are refusing toilets to go in particular areas?
Yes, local community, because they don't want a toilet near the house.
It was on the news. It was on the
Okay.
news.
Bromley.
Was this
So-
what you wanted to come in on? Because I think it was specific to your constituency.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was in Biggin Hill was one of the ones where
Yeah.
TfL got a bit of a mauling. All I was going to ask you is what you are doing differently as a result of the experience you had there.
So I think in Biggin Hill, the engagement with the borough, I think, was accepted, was done, but the
No, it wasn't.
local, okay.
And it wasn't accepted by the borough.
Right. So the local community weren't given any notice, which
That's
was an error, and the approach to working with the borough to deliver it has changed as a result of what happened at Biggin Hill. I think the issue we've got is that we want to make the bus network as accessible as possible, and bus routes don't start and end in bus garages, and if they did, life would be simple, but they don't. And we really are trying our hardest to work with authorities. You know, we're working with the fire brigade about putting something outside a fire station in Lambeth, and we're doing what we can to get everyone on board with the issue, because I think everyone accepts this as a basic human need, but it is very challenging. So we've definitely learnt lessons from Biggin Hill, but we will have further challenges to come. So what we need to do is find alternative options. So, you know, where we can share facilities between operators, we're doing that. But in many of these locations, it's very difficult. So we have a plan. We're on track to deliver the majority by the end of July. There will be a couple of difficult ones, but we're looking for alternative locations for those.
Just on that, Claire, I think,
Yeah.
again, because I remember seeing that news clip, and I think the main thing, going back to some of Member Bacon's point, the residents weren't informed. So to sort of open your window and you then see this,
And it wasn't attractive.
it wasn't, you know, it looked like a Dalek
Well,
box.
it was
So-
actually worse than that, Chair, because not only were they not informed, TfL claimed that they were. And the local ward councillors went and knocked on every single door, and not one of them had anything. It was a real PR disaster from Transport for London, because they were treated in a very offhand way. The only good thing that came out of it was that TfL moved relatively speedy to get rid of it. So a month after it was installed, it was gone, and the grass verge was reinstalled. And unfortunately, what it did do is sabotage what was meant to be a decent project for people that really need it, i.e. bus drivers. And you know, the things aren't designed particularly synthetically to be put in a residential area anyway. I mean, it's nicknamed the TERDIS locally because it has a strong resemblance to the TARDIS, and obviously things are going on there. One question I was going to ask about that is Julia Lopez, the Member of Parliament for Hornchurch and Upminster, wrote to Transport for London and did ask why these things couldn't be doubling up as a disabled loo, and I gather there's a key card or something to get into them.
Right.
Certainly I know there's a security lock on because I went to look at one in Big Hill. That was refused. Is there any particular reason why?
I'm afraid I don't know, because it's not the project director delivering these will have responded to that, so I don't know. I didn't know that.
Back to us on that then.
Sorry?
Are you able to come back to us
Yes,
on
absolutely,
that?
absolutely.
And could you also, I mean, because obviously there are assembly members for all areas around London, so if there are particular areas where you're having trouble, I'm sure assembly members would be helpful in trying to
That would be very welcome,
get the local
thank you.
community on board, because it is absolutely fundamental that bus drivers have access to toilets. Yeah.
Just moving on to...
I'll just quickly add one more thing. The problem that we're also facing is that there are toilets around that we could use. Most tube stations have toilets that a bus driver could use, but we are refused entry. And that's perhaps something that TfL could actually
Refused
help us
entry in
with.
tube stations?
Tube stations, yeah. We've
Staff
got
toilets, it should be.
bus stands outside tube stations, and when you try to access toilets there, they'll refuse you. The management of those tube stations will
It seems to me,
refuse.
Chair, that's a rather easy fix,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So I can respond to that, because that is not the agreement between buses and London Underground. They are to open up their facilities. I think the issue we have, and it comes up regularly, and every time it comes up, I put one of my managers onto scene to sort it out, is locally how people treat each other at that location on the day that someone goes to access the toilet is where it's falling down. And we've got to sort that out, because management have agreed. Of course, it makes absolute sense. Why wouldn't we use our facilities for bus drivers? So we need to make sure that every time we have a new issue, we resolve it. So that is something that we're currently doing. But yeah, thank you.
So management have agreed, and has that been communicated to all layers of staff?
So the director of stations in London Underground has said, yes, of course you can use these facilities. So where we can, we do. Where we have problems, we deal with that with the local management to get that unblocked. The main point
No
of it,
pun intended.
yeah, no pun intended, is about capacity actually. So not wishing to go back to that pun, but it is about some locations are heavily used, and we need to make sure we've got the right facilities for all of the drivers. So, you know, if it means we need to put in more facilities for bus drivers, we should do that.
We should do. Okay, great. Just moving on to our last section of apologies. We have over quite a lot. So it's just coming back to the incident report and investigation, and Member Pigeon has one.
Yeah, so if I just, you've already set out, Claire, how you've improved incident reporting, and perhaps we might get more detail of that in writing, because we're short of time. But the one area we haven't touched on this morning, which I'm very conscious of, is what support victims are getting who are injured in incidents involving buses and their families. We've also got the Sarah Hope line, and see Sarah over there listening in. I'm wondering whether you could just give a high level what additional support you're putting in there. Maybe we can get more detail in writing as well afterwards.
I wonder if I might take that with,
Yes,
with
sure.
permission. This is an area which we are very very aware of. We convened a session earlier this year with victims of road collisions, particularly via some of the third sector organisations like Break and Road Peace, to bring those people together, and we brought them together with the mayor, the deputy mayor, with the commissioner Mike Brown, with Gareth Powell. So and those people spent a significant amount of time with those people, really hearing their stories, understanding where things are falling down. Out of that, we've convened some work internally to look at how we, Transport for London, can help drive improvement across the piece, and we've continued to liaise with those organisations, with Sarah and so on, in helping shape that. We recognise that the sort of in the first instance of a collision taking place, we, Transport for London, are not the first responder. The police and the ambulance service are the first responder. That person will then be treated. They will make their way through the NHS. We may change junction layouts and so on. And the picture that's emerged is that there is a multiplicity of agencies involved at different points, and that some of those people are falling between the cracks in terms of the treatment they receive. Some of those people are not receiving information about the incident that they were involved in. There's a broader wrapper around that the victim of a road collision is not treated in the same way as the victim of a violent crime, is not accorded the same rights and support. So what we've recognised is that victims are not getting the support they require, they're not even necessarily getting the support that's available, and that although this is a multi-agency piece and Transport for London only has an element of this, we're now looking at how we can use our good offices and our influence with other agencies to help improve that experience of the victim. And so we've identified a number of areas where we want to make improvements, and we've now convened a small project group to start to move forward on those.
So is there like an action plan of things you're taking forward that we could see?
There isn't an action plan yet. We've been through we've been through a rapid development process that's taken about 4 weeks to develop a number of areas in which we know we need to develop better.
So could
actions.
we see that sort of list of the areas you're working on? Could you set that out in a letter to us?
Yes.
So we could just to get a feel, because it's such an important area. And it sounds like you're doing some great work there. It'd be good for us to get more of a feel for some of the detail.
Yes, we'd be happy to write you.
Wonderful. And also whether you could pick up in that the issue of whether there's been any progress on extending the brief of the Victims Commissioner for London to include victims of road crime and road collision.
We'll include that.
Lovely. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you all very much. Apologies that we have gone over time. And just to thank our guests again, Claire Mann, Stuart Reid, Sanisa Super, Tom Wilson, Tony Wilson and Tom Kearney for your discussions and contributions this afternoon now. Can we note the report and the discussions?
Noted.
Can we agree to delegate authority from me in conjunction with the group leads, the final output for our tram and bus safety in London?
Agreed.
And can we agree the work programme for 2019-20? And the date of the next meeting is scheduled. Apologies. Can we also delegate through me in consultation with the group leads to agree to scope the terms of reference for the next investigation on London's transport now and in the future? Agreed. And date of our next meeting is Wednesday the 10th of July, 10 a.m. We're back in the chamber, so hopefully no more additional mix-ups, and don't have any other urgent business, so meeting is closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
GLA, Committee Room 5, Sound.